exciting day of conversations about horses from dawn till dusk. You know, the more intrepid among us, we're here at 8 o'clock, and it's, you know, the sun has set long ago, and you all are still here excited and ready to learn. And I really appreciate that. Because this is our final event of the day, I would be remiss if we didn't take a moment just to acknowledge once again the incredible support of different folks who have contributed to this day. We have folks like our visitor services team at the museum, Liza at the Center for Asian Studies, and a whole host of folks who have given a piece of their day or their resources or their time to make this happen. In particular, we would not be here without the support of the College of Arts and Sciences, Caden Prize, as well as the Center for Asian Studies, who has provided an event grant here, sponsorship by the Center of the American West, who just hosted our speakers there for dinner and has also contributed intellectually in several different talks today on different topics. And of course, you are here hosted in our home, the CU Museum, and thankful to our director, Dr. Nancy Stevens, but really this whole team of folks, including, I don't know if you can hear me, Jera, but thank you to our incredible team that made this happen. Nothing would be possible without that group of folks. And even though this was a very special day, this is not that unusual in terms of really exciting things happening here in the museum. Take this, if this is meaningful to you in any way, I hope you take this as an invitation to come back here for additional events, to drop by, take your extended family through the exhibits, to be a part of our public programs, and to just generally stay connected with our community, because there's lots of exciting things going on here, at many different times throughout the year. So, that being said, thank you all for being here tonight. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you our distinguished keynote speaker for the evening. Professor Dr. Akin Ogundiran, in many ways needs no introduction, but he happens to be the Cardiss Collins Professor of Arts and Sciences, endowed Professor of Arts and Sciences, as well as interdisciplinary scholar from Northwestern University. So he traveled here from a relatively long way to share his wisdom and expertise with us. Dr. Ogundiran's scholarship, like many of the different talks you've heard today, but I think in an especially unique and powerful way, is interdisciplinary. I heard him introduce himself earlier as, I am an archaeologist, historian, and anthropologist, right? And I think that's probably only a few of the nouns or descriptors that he might use to introduce himself, because his scholarship is intersectional in all these different ways. He is one of the leading thinkers in the archaeology and history of many different things. Most notably, for those that were here for the book signing, and most recently, his book, The Yoruba, A New History, which has won several really prestigious book awards and book prizes, but more importantly, applies this really thoughtful interdisciplinary thinking to topics and corners of archaeology, present and past, stories and perspectives coming out of not only West Africa, but the Atlantic, many different corners. And in fact, part of his impact and legacy is as a collaborator and a mentor to many folks in this room, including myself, including our own Olamide, who presented his scholarship today, and many, many countless others. So I want you to please join me in extending a really warm welcome to Dr. Akin Ogundiran to share his scholarship with us. Thank you so much. One final note, because he sold out all of his books tonight, there are no more books to acquire. But I was told by the Boulder Bookstore, as his scholarship resonates with you tonight, there are these book plates, and he is contractually obligated to sign one for you, and Boulder Bookstore will honor it if you would like to pick up your copy of the Yoruba New History afterwards. So please again, a warm welcome to Akin Ogundiran.
Wow. First of all, thank you, Will, for that that ends well in introduction. If I have dollars on me, naira, I would have been spraying you the way we do in West Africa. This day has been filled with horse energy and grace. It's a sumptuous feast of ideas. I want to thank all of you for staying the course. Many of you have been here for the past 12 hours. So thank you so much.
Can you hold a little closer?
Yeah, many of you have been here for the past 12 hours. So thank you so much. Can you hear me now? Right? Okay. Horses and the human story, the global perspective. What do I know about that? Will, since your book is the reason we're here, let me begin by adding to the menu of congratulations to you for writing a book that inspires, a book that makes some of us rethink what we think or what we thought about horses. Hoof Beats, How Horses Shaped Human History. In my first reading of your book manuscript that your publisher sent to me, this is the first time you're hearing this. This is what I shared with your publisher. Hoof Beats is a genre-bending book. It achieved two goals. First, it is the most comprehensive history of horses from their Eocene origins to the present. Second, it presents us with the anthropological history of how horses and humans have influenced each other, especially since the end of the Pliocene, but preceding that, we know that. In this richly textured book, William Taylor painstakingly amassed and synthesized a vast body of literature from eclectic sources, including archaeology, genomics, osteology, documentary sources, and oral traditions from all parts of the globe. Delivered in beautiful and accessible prose, and this is what gets to the back of the book, that gallops, prances, and saunters with the effects of equine majesty. The result is a compelling global history of the world people and horses made together. It's a captivating story that horse lovers, scholars, teachers, students, and the general public will find irresistible. End of quote. The post-publication accolades this book has received from such eminent places as New York Times justify the advanced praises that reviewers like me and William Grant have heaped on this book. Congratulations. There have been books that purportedly cover the global history of horses, but whose horses did not take them beyond the Mediterranean and did not even venture south of the Sahara. In Will's book, such exotic names as Edele, Oyoile, Oyo Empire, and Yoruba appear. These are exotic places, in far, far distant places. This is the first time such places belonging to another galaxy in the horse universe appear in the global history of horses. And I must say, asking someone like me to keynote this conference is audacious. After all, I studied that far distant land, supposedly on the periphery of the horse or equestrian world. Dr. Taylor has given me this task that I accepted out of admiration and respect for his work, for his scholarship, but I also dreaded this invitation. The dread came from the fact that I don't consider myself to be an expert on horses, but I've written about horses in the stories I tell about empire, about cultural formation, power politics, community building, epistemology, and identity making in West Africa, with emphasis on the Yoruba people. Then when I saw the program for today, I became even more terrified that I will be speaking last. After dinner, I sent Will an email. I said, who's going to show up on a Friday night? You are here. Thank you so much. I didn't know that this place is so powerful like this, so steaming with energy and curiosity. Thank you for coming when you should be somewhere carousing on Friday night. You were here carousing with me. So thank you. So I know that I'm standing between you and your bedtime, or maybe extra drink for Friday. I'm going to get extra drink myself, so bear with me. The eight papers are including a seminar and discussion we've listened to today, actually illustrate what it will take to develop a new field that we might call anthropoequinology. I think I coined that term, right? I think so. In this emerging new field, thanks to the work of Dr. Taylor and other participants in this room, we will be attentive to horse biogeography and evolution, the impacts of horse riding on human anatomy and life course health, the life and afterlife of horses from military hardware and performative politics to gastronomy, from the cultural history of horses through the visual and performative arts to the place of horses in religious ideas and practices. We have also been treated to a lively discussion on the evolution and changing forms of horse sports and the debates about human responsibilities to horses as loyal companions in times of stress, such as the Great Horse Flu of 1872 to 1873. All these presentations underscore why we must take horses seriously as important agents in human stories, and how humans have also been important to what horses have become. The fine-grained qualities of the papers and discussions at this conference originated from their contextual, place-focused, and culturally centered approaches. So, what can I add to this menu of anthropoequinology? What I want to do this evening is to take you to that far away place that Will mentioned in his book, but which is rarely mentioned in the global history of horses. Places like the Ghana Empire, the Oyo Empire, Igbo-Ugwu, Kanembonu, Ile-Ife, Yoruba, and other exotic places that we don't normally associate with horse culture. I want to use horses and the theme of horses to explore questions about the nature of history and power, cultural production, and epistemology in West Africa. To do all of this, I argue that horses occupy all three spaces that, according to Charles Peirce, constitute science of culture: iconic, indexical, and symbolic science. This argument reinforces what has been said today, that we must bring horses into humanistic and social science explorations on what it means to be. Not what it means to be human. It is more than that. To be bridges the gaps the disciplines have created between humanity and animality, as I previously mentioned this afternoon, between spiritual and profane, between our world and their ancestral world, and between senses that go beyond our own senses. That's what it means to be, when you were able to think beyond our own senses and listen carefully to the senses of the insects, to the senses of the horses, to the insects of the plants. That is what it means to be. Horses enter the Sahara. Into the 2nd millennium BC. The figurative presence of the horse and horse rider in the Nok Terracotta Act suggests that horse riding reached the Sahel and Savannah of West Africa during the 1st millennium BC. Outside Egypt, the Nok sculptures are the oldest large figurative art in continental Africa. The number of these three-dimensional objects are in thousands, dating from 900 BC to 200 CE. While we cannot directly date this particular one that we are looking at, it is not less than 500 BC. It is therefore striking that us is represented in this early African three-dimensional art tradition, right in the middle of present-day Nigeria, in an area that is woodland savanna, around 500 BC, not in the Sahel, in a place that would have been difficult to raise and maintain horses. As Africanist art historian Abat Cole noted, it was the horse, not the camel, that opened trans-Saharan trade and travel. Many scholars have also noted that horses were central to the increase in political centralization and urbanism in West Africa between 300 and 800 CE. From Mauritania to Lake Chad, the horse burial at Aissa Duduje in the Mandara Islands in present-day Lake Chad region between Cameroon and Nigeria indicates that horses were associated with the emergence of social and political hierarchies in the Lake Chad region in the mid-1st millennium AD, about the same time that Ghana Empire began its political ascent. In those early instances, they were used as animals of prestige, and those who owned them commanded the awe and respect of their people. Like elsewhere, horses were closely associated with elite social status and political power. They were symbolic of and represent the virtues of honor, strength, bravery, physical courage, prowess, domination, virility, and militarism. Horses were also fearful bearers of power and domination. In the Sahel, those who had access to these animals used them to exact control over their neighbors, subdue vast territories, and extract labor, taxes, and resources. They were also part of courtly pomp and circumstance. Berber and Moorish merchants who visited Ghana Empire in the 11th century reported that when the king of Ghana sat on the throne, he did so in a domed pavilion around which stood 10 horses covered with gold embroidered materials. Of the men who channeled horses as hardware of war, conquest, and defense, and used them as ornaments of power, Herbert Cole, in his book, Icons, Ideas and Power in the Art of Africa, has this to say about them and their horses. Quote, "A mounted horseman fuses human intelligence with animal strength, creating an awesome presence far greater than the sum of his parts. The strength of this unit is daunting enough when the horse stands still, but when catalyzed by motion and speed, it unleashes superhuman power. It is no wonder that all over the world, equestrian images have glorified the lives of emperors, heroes, and warriors, even if they never rode horses. So it is in West Africa, where the superiority of riders, both physically and figuratively, identifies them as standardized, affluent, forceful males. The mounted man generally outranks the unmounted. He is faster, richer, higher, more visually and psychologically impressive, and thus in a more commanding position from which to lead." End of quote. Without horses, the Mali Empire and the Songhai Empire that succeeded it would not have been possible. Likewise, the vast territorial claims of the Kanem-Borno Empire from the 8th to 19th centuries were made possible by the cavalry. The political exports and trading contacts these empires established with their rainforest neighbors brought the idea of horses to those southern regions, where the endemic trichomoniasis disease and high humidity made horse racing or breeding impossible. The evidence is spotty, but it suggests that some individuals brought this equine into the rainforest environment in the early second millennium CE. However, such equines would not have lived long in the rainforest environment. Between the 11th and 13th centuries, horses appeared in the iconography of power and authority in two major polities in the rainforest of West Africa. One in Igbo and the other in Ileife. Igbo to my left, and then the other one to my right. Let's look at Igbo. You are looking at a copper alloy equestrian figure, about 06 inches tall. This copper alloy equestrian figure was probably the handle of a whisk. It was found in the grave of an important ruler or a leader. The whisk was likely made from horse tail, a symbol of authority in many parts of West Africa up to today. The whisk has decayed in the acidic soil of Igbo, but the copper alloy handle survives. The person buried in the grave, as you are looking at, must have had considerable wealth and power, able to trade as far as Kanembonu, as far as Ghana Empire. In this grave, we find glass beads coming from the Mediterranean, right deep in the rainforest of West Africa, in the 9th century AD. The decorative motifs, including the facial marks, are all part of the classic Igbo decoration style. So this object was not made outside. It was made right there in Igbo, as these other artifacts associated with it show. It is then possible that the sculptor who made this handle was already familiar with horses elsewhere, or the person buried here owns one or more horses. In Ileife, the classical city of Ileife, which overlaps with Ugohuku in the 11th through 13th centuries and continues through the 15th century, several terracotta figures of horses have been found. The most elaborate is this image on the screen, depicting a bridle and single reins of chain. This sculpture is part of a vast corpus of classic Ife art, dating between 1100 and 1420 CE. Historian Robin Law, in his book, Horses in West African History, has noted that the period from the 14th to the 19th centuries was the age of cavalry dominance in the savanna areas of West Africa. The imagery of mounted figures proliferated in wood carving during this period. These are almost universally a male figure, representing a warrior who is also a heroic leader, conqueror, predator, and defender. These images could also refer to supreme office holder unconnected to horsemanship, but a leader nevertheless adept at community building and statecraft, serving as peacekeeper and judge. The horse became an ever-present image in all West African cultures during this period, between the 14th and 19th centuries. Even among those people who are remotely connected to equestrian culture. The Yoruba have one of the most elaborate and largest corpora of equestrian representations in West African art. There are differences in the reasons for these invocations of horse imagery. The hegemonic state of Oyo, for example, used the horse as a symbol of royalty and conquest in the elite visual arts and state affirmative arts. The imagery of the horse was used to denote royalty, even when horses were not physically present. And in instances where horses were present, these were usually dwarf horses that had adapted to the humid and endemic trypanosomiasis environment of the rainforest and woodlands savannah. The first three of these images show that the mounted figures are bigger than the horses that they mount. We have excavated several horse remains in Edele and Oboyoele, and Olumide presented on the horse assemblage from Edele this morning. Oyo was a cavalry state. Further north in the woodland savannah, right there, right, the block over there, that's Oyoele. Edele was one of the colonies that Oyo established. The Oyo elite invested heavily in horses in order to fight their wars of expansion and quickly move people across long distances. The war, horses were imported since it was almost, it was not impossible, but it was difficult to breed horse wolves in this woodland environment. And when they tried, the quality was not what they needed for the battlefield. Historical sources indicate that Oyo's horses appear to have come mostly from Western Sudan, present-day Mali, Senegal, Niger Republic area. These were Barbary horses, known for their ferocity and hardy stamina. But these horses were also prestige animals. Military power, superiority, and chivalry were associated with horsemen in Oyo Empire. The canon of Oyo Yoruba art, especially in wooden sculpture, is suffused with the imagery of the mounted soldiers. You know, this image, for example, represents, excuse me here, I think I missed one image. Okay, let me see, maybe I can find it. No, okay, pardon me there. Okay, that image is missing. Okay, one of these images represents one of the 70 cavalry, elite cavalrymen in the Oyo Empire, known as Esho. Esho is a class of non-hereditary class of military officers. They were war generals who lived by the ethos of bravery. They shaved their heads and left a long tuft of braided hair in the middle as the marker of their identity as war generals. These men were celebrated for their bravery. Panegyrics, praise poems were composed. One of them is this: one of these two things befits an Esho. The Esho must fight and conquer. The Esho must fight and perish. An Esho must never be shot in the back. His wounds must always be in front. So Oyo had 70 elite war generals. It is either they win the battle or they die in battle. You don't go back home and say, I lost. This was the engine of Oyo Empire. Yes, the horses were there, but the mounted men, those who mounted them, were also ferocious like their horses. The battle was the one, or they perish. So these men were, of course, celebrated as the ultimate symbol of citizenship. Horses occupy many spaces of social science in the Oyo Empire. I'm going to mention 5 briefly. One of these is class. So when we talk about horses, we have to begin to think about what horses represent and how humans form relationships with one another. Yes, human-animal relationships configure this conference, but also how the symbol, how the phenomenon of horses also become the medium of interactions between people. One of these ways is how class was defined in Oyo Empire. Oyo had a sumptuary law that only privileged the elite who owned horses to consume horse meat. So there were thousands of horses in the empire, But only those who owned these horses could eat them. And our archaeological evidence has shown that there's a special pattern in the way horse remains are distributed. You only find horse remains in political and power places. You don't see it any other place. For example, in Edeile, we only find horse remains in the governor's quarter. In Oyoile, we find horse remains in the enslaved people's quarters. But that is because the enslaved people were receiving their food rations from the elite, from the palace. So they could partake in the consumption of horse meat. But citizens who are not from elite homes could not partake in horse consumption. And you cannot sell horse meat in the market. Of course, the elites were worried that they don't want people shooting their horses and selling the meat in the market. So they have very clear sumptuary law that defines social class. Likewise, the people who take care of horses in Oyo Empire, they were men from servile background. They were slaves. Horse handling was a marker of slavery in the empire. And Oyo citizens would not touch that work. Cutting grasses for slaves, cutting grasses for horses, watering them. For those of you who work with horses, you know how intense that work is. It could take up to 4 individuals to take care of one horse. Feeding them, taking care of their health needs, is very intensive. But that work was branded to the enslaved. So horses became a way of defining who was a citizen and who was non-citizen. Also, state rituals. At the end of the harvesting season, the last thing that will be harvested will be grasses. These grasses were harvested. The person that will lead the harvesting, in the ritual harvesting of grasses, will be the king's horseman. The king has a horseman, the head of all the horse caretakers. We call Olokwenshi, the one who owns the reins of the horse. Olokwenshi will be the one to perform the rituals of symbolically cutting the grasses and presenting the grasses to the king, because these grasses will have to be stored to last through the dry season before the bush was burnt, so that they could feed the horses with grass throughout the dry season. And all the people in the provinces must come to the capital, bringing certain bundles of grasses with them, so that again horses define the end of the harvesting season, and also it's a mark of who is subservient to the king or who is a subject of the king. So let's look at personhood and dependency. The book I'm sharing with you is titled Death and the King's Horseman, the very famous book by Wole Soyinka. The head of the king's horse stable, Olokwenshi, must die the same day the king of Oyo dies. That is the law. So the head of the head of the king's horse stable lost his own personhood. His personhood was dependent on the personhood of the king. And the day the king died, honorably, he must commit suicide. Of course, during the British colonial rule, things happened, and the British they thought that was barbaric, and that the Olokwenshi should not die, and that became a crisis because Olokwenshi must die. So these are some of the ways in which horses mediated personal relationships across class, personhood, rituals, power, slavery, and citizenship in the empire. So I'm trying to keep going here. What is striking is that the imagery of horses was also incorporated into the culture and artistic canons of some Yoruba regions where horses were absent. This is particularly the case in the hilly and rainforest Ekiti country of the Yoruba region, the area that I circled, that is encircled over there. That is the rainforest, it's a hilly area, it's occupied by small principalities. They did not have the wherewithal to buy horses, they did not maintain horses. But we find representations of horses in their ritual iconography, especially in the festival called Epa Festival. Epa Festival is a series of annual religious events and communal ceremonies that commemorate ancestors and invoke prayers for fertility of the womb and the land. Epa is a masking tradition involving the wearing of hood-like headpieces surmounted by animal and human figures in annual public ceremonies. Military personnel were not mounted in the kingdoms, and for the most part, their political elite did not own horses. The incorporation of horse images into Epa masks was a counter-hegemonic response to the incursions of mounted men from the drier savanna in the north, such as the Oyo and Mube. Those military incursions destroyed several Ekiti principalities, displaced their people, and many people were taken into slavery. Through the equestrian motifs in Epa Festival, the Ekiti people, however, remember the many layers of external aggressions against them dating back to the late 15th century. And now they use this imagery to commemorate and celebrate their resistance and survival. Remember those lost to those external aggressions, either through death or slavery. Art historian and anthropologist J.R. Ojo, following Victor Turner, has called this appropriation of the horse imagery, quote, a ritual role reversal, end of quote, in which the various Ekiti communities sought to domesticate the powers of the various foreign cavalries who disrupted their lives over the past 400 years at different periods. With war songs and martial styles of dance, they will carry the mask around the town, with the masquerade stopping at all entries of the town, all shrine houses and compounds to offer prayers and sacrifices. So there were no mounted men, there were no horses in Ekiti, but horses were present in the ideas about what it meant to be a community. No doubt, the equestrian culture in West Africa is a celebration of masculinity and is intimately associated with patriarchy. But there were also women in equestrian art and in equestrian ritual and lived experiences who either appropriated the main authority of horses or contested patriarchy. A Yoruba goddess that is associated with horses is Oya, the Yoruba goddess of storms, winds, and rebirth. Oya is a warrior goddess and the goddess of motherhood and children. Oya is the only female deity in Yoruba pantheon whose iconography and shrines regularly depict the female horse rider. According to our devotees, Oya is a manly woman. Again, Oya is a manly woman who deserves to ride the horse like other deserving men. But outside the ritual archive, we also encounter women in historical records who use their love and dexterity for horse riding to challenge the patriarchy that equestrian culture represented. The most famous of such women is Aduni Oluwole, a mid-20th century ferocious nationalist and anti-colonial activist in Nigeria. She was an avid horse rider, and she regularly rode her horses in strategic public spaces to symbolically undermine and critique the British colonial patriarchy and the patriarchy of our fellow Nigerian men. This is according to, this picture was taken from Said Aderito's book. The horse motif also shows up in an unlikely place, the Ifa divination, a Yoruba system of divination for searching for the ultimate cause and final answer. It's the way of knowing beyond the ordinary. The master Ifa diviner, Babalawo, is the fountain of knowledge in the Yoruba cultural universe. The Babalawo is a learned person who sought to solve material, social, spiritual, and healing problems through processes of diagnosis and prescription. His knowledge came from many parts of training, from many years of training, and was required to have an in-depth understanding of the history, sociology, metaphysics, religion, and philosophy of his people. With this knowledge, Babalawo helped his clients navigate the maze of life in their search for healing, self-realization, knowledge, and meaning. One of the important paraphernalia of Ifa priests is agere, Ifa divination bowl. This is where the divination pernods Ikin are kept. Agere is regarded as the temple of Orunmila, the deity of divination and wisdom. The wooden sculpture on which the bowl is mounted comes in many forms. The horse motif entered the design and form of agere in the 17th century. As horse imagery gained ground as symbol of warfare, domination, power, and wealth. But Ifa priests are not warriors, they were intellectuals. They did not wield political power. However, as spokespersons of the gods, they could influence political decisions. So, what is the horse doing in the paraphernalia of Ifa divination? Let us hear from the diviners. A popular chant among the Ifa priests goes like this: I, Orunmila, hereby declare that henceforth we, Ifa priests, will ride horses. We will ride horses. We will ride on horseback as diviners. We will ride on horseback every time. The metaphor of horses in Ifa iconography illustrates the importance of travel and movement for Ifa priests. They were always on the move to meet other priests, to exchange ideas, to learn more, and to enrich their knowledge. This horse and equestrian motif speaks to three subjects. One, the use of horses in agere is aspirational. It is a visual imagery of how the Ifa priest wants to travel. Two, this image is a metaphor for the Ifa priest as the one linking different communities, serving as a conveyor and convergence of different ideas between villages, towns, city-states, and kingdoms, and across the Oyo Empire and beyond. The horse imagery in agere Ifa serves as a visual imagery of how the Babalawo connects spaces and different times, and therefore embodies the speed of the horse in reducing time and collapsing spaces. Third, the horse motif is also symbolic of the speed with which Ifa priests find solutions that might have troubled the client for a long time. Don't forget, the Ifa priest provides final solution to the problem. A relevant Yoruba aphorism states that Òwe lẹṣin ọ̀rọ̀, bọ́rọ̀ bá sọnù, òwe la fi ń wá. The Yoruba will joke that the person who says a proverb in his in-laws house will be the one to also interpret it. So let me interpret that. The proverb is the horse of speech. The proverb is the horse of speech. When we misplace the right speech befitting a moment, it is the proverb that helps us find the right words. So the Yoruba associate proverb, aphorism, which is saying, as horse of speech. A client consults with the Ifa priest because he or she is missing something, and he or she is seeking to know and find a solution to a problem. The Ifa priest is the source of that solution. Inside the divination bowl are the 16 palm nuts that he will use to seek the knowledge, the explanation, and the remedies needed to solve his client's problems. The Babalawo is the horse that takes the client quickly to the desired solution. The Ifa priests are intellectuals with deep knowledge, as I said, about everything in the Yoruba world. Here, the same way a horseman reaches his destination quicker than a pedestrian, the Ifa priest brings his client to a solution faster than any other interventionist. Let me now begin to close this talk with horse-tail whisker that I mentioned in Igbo. Horse-tail whisker is a symbol of prestige, high status, leadership, and deep knowledge, carried by kings and Ifa priests. The horse-tail whisker is an essential object that Yoruba kings carry when they sit in state or make public appearances. They must always hold horse-tail whisker. It is the object they use to bless their subjects and grant divine grace to others. The mere presence of horse-tail whisker on the throne, even when the king is not there, indicates that the king is there. And you must bow, you must prostrate for the horse-tail whisker. Why is this so? For an answer, let us turn to another verse in the Ifa origin. It was divine for the horse-tail, who was the child of the Creator God. It was predicted that by the time the horse-tail had become famous and prosperous, it will become the focus of attention. We dance carrying the horse-tail. We inspect the horse-tail in admiration. Taking my cue from the horse-tail episteme, I pray that you may all be subjects of admiration, affirmation, approval, and celebration. Like the horse-tail whisker, who enjoy life longer than the horse. May you live long and always be relevant. May your evening and your night be as glorious as the life of the horse-tail whisker. In horse-tail, the horse achieves immortality. It is immortality we are searching for. Will's book assures him that he's achieved immortality already. Because beyond him, we continue to talk about the book. The book outlasts us. It is immortality we are searching for, so that generations after us will continue to remember our good deeds. May we achieve this immortality and live on from generation to generation forever without end. Ashe. Thank you.
So we have a moment now here to ask some questions and Q&A with our keynote speaker. So please raise your hand and I'll come around with the microphone.
Microphone. I'm getting PTSD here.
The final stretch here for the microphone.
Okay. No static. Thank you so much. That was really fascinating. I think that one of the things I liked the most was how you were able to frame the horse as this medium between formations of citizenship and these kind of social identities between people. The horse was kind of this intermediary there, right? And that was kind of within a community. So I was wondering if you have a sense of that between communities, so kind of that either horse is present or absent beyond communities, and what that kind of might do for relationships as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. There are many levels. One level is, let me start with the Yoruba proverb. No one who is not a swimmer should dare fight in the middle of the river with a swimmer. no one who does not command a horse should confront a horseman in the savannah. That proverb is about power relations. It's to demonstrate the command that horsemen have. So, in communities whereby they do not have horses, you don't put yourself at risk if you live in the same ecological zone to confront those who have those horses. And that is the foundation of the conquest that we see. I mean, the reason why Songa Empire, Mali Empire occupied that kind of territory was because of horses. And the fact that those who had it were able to subdue their neighbors, even when they did not pose a threat to them, they were able to subdue them easily. Now, that same relationship cut across ecological zones. For example, Oyo Empire, when it acquired horses in the late 16th century and was exploring how to use it, they ventured into the rainforest and they were soundly defeated. Despite their horses. Horses don't do well in the rainforest, so they learned their lesson. They recalibrated and they follow another path to expand their. So that is one level of relationship, how horses define relationship. But what we see, as I show in my talk, is that even places where they did not necessarily have horses, but they absorb, or let me say, they appropriate the idea of horses to navigate their own internal cohesion by carving horse imagery. Because in the epistemology of this kind of region is the fact that you can turn anything into anything. So a stone, you can look at an object and say, oh, this is a rock. But there are things you can say to the rock. There are things you can do to the rock that the rock will move. Right? The same thing with trees. One of the gifts of West Africa I always argue, to global civilization is wood carving. Actually, West and Central Africa, Niger Congo peoples in general, prolific in carving. The tree they use to carve, there are certain things you do before you cut the trees down, because the tree is a person. It's not just a tree. So, by using those trees to carve images in horses, it is as if people behave as if they actually own these horses, as if they have horses. Right? So there will be rituals that they perform to the effigy of a horse, believing that the horse will go out on their behalf to fight their wars for them. So that's why I'm saying that horses can exist, can be present, even when physically the horse is not there. Because people can actually generate their own horses, right? So this is the kind of epistemology that we begin to see in West Africa, especially between the 14th and 19th century, as the whole landscape, whether it's the grassland, whether it's the savanna, whether it's in the rainforest, all became part of a Christian culture. So a Christian culture is more than those who own horses. A Christian culture also existed by those who create, talk about AI, we're talking about AI now, right? Generative AI, who generated horses by commanding forces of nature, by talking to the tree and turning trees into horses, and the horses go out in the daytime and night to fight or to run errands for them. And sometimes they will wear these effigies with cloths. They will wear them with, they will have cloth put on them, and there will be sacrifices they make periodically to them.
That was a great talk. Thank you. It raised a lot of questions. I have two. The first one is in the 1400, late 1400s, the Portuguese started trading on the coast there, and so they must have traded horses, didn't they? Is there an interaction conversation there about horses coming from Europe at that particular period? And the other question, Catherine Dunham famously named her book A Divine Horseman, referring to, her theory was that people in Haiti, their primary religious ancestors were in Dahomey, Benin, the same area, and they defined the term referred to being possessed, so being ridden as a horse.
Yes.
So I was wondering if that was also currently involved.
Yes.
Yoruba culture.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much for those questions. There's no evidence that the Portuguese traded horses in West Africa. No. Because the Portuguese did not really venture inland. They might have brought horses on their ship, but they rarely ventured deep into I think they ventured to Benin. Well, they were more active in Congo. They ventured around Congo, but beyond that, they did not really. Australia was not a part of their. Horses were coming from the north, from the grasslands, The Dahomians were influenced by the Yoruba religious landscape a lot, and that is where the idea of being mounted. So when the spirit of Orisha enter your body, the Yoruba will say the person has been mounted by the Orisha. Laura Matori wrote a book many years ago, Sex and the Empire That Was No More. He kind of elaborates on this. So the idea of being mounted like a horse is when the Orisha mounted, that is when people go into trance. When they yielded their body to the Orisha, and then they are doing things. So when they are doing things, when you are mounted, when they are going to trance, that means that the Orisha has taken over their body. And then they say that they are being mounted by the Orisha. So that mounting is like so they become the horse of the Orisha. They become the horse of the deity. And that is where Catherine Dunham got that idea of being mounted, the horse. So that is where the concept of being mounted in Haiti came from. Through Yoruba, through Dahomey, into Haiti. And of course, so that you become the vessel of the Orisha, you become the vessel of the deities. And of course, it was an honorable thing a great experience to have when you are mounted, and then gradually you are also taken back to life. So it's an important spiritual experience to go through, to be mounted.
Thanks very much, Akin. It was a wonderful talk. I'm wondering about the consumption of horse meat, and it's only within sort of the urban centers of power. And a lot of the cavalry would have been house of slaves as well. Would the enslaved as well be privy to the sort of the horse meat
Consumption?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
And then just a quick second question, and I just hope you could talk a bit about that more in terms of that power dynamic between enslaved and non-enslaved. But then also, do you ever find evidence of vehicles, carriages, things like that attached to horses in any parts of Africa? Or is this sort of, I just haven't heard of it, but I'm just wondering. Thank you. Question?
Yeah, thank you, Annie, for that question. Enslaved people were used to take care of horses, but enslaved men were also recruited into the army of the empire. In fact, the head of the army in Oyo Empire must be must be a slave. So because sometime around 1640, 1650, Oyo Empire tried to professionalize the army. And they felt that the way to do that, because the army was under the control of the political figures. And they did not want political figures to interfere with the kind of ethos of devotion, ethos of militarism that they wanted their soldiers to have. So then they created the supreme general commander of the army, who must always be of servant background. So this must be the man who entered the empire as a slave and worked his way up to become a ferocious warrior. Those are the men that became the Ariyono-Kakanfo. That means the head of the army. And that person must never live inside the capital. He must live outside in another town, because they knew before colonialism that military could organize a coup, right? so they were afraid of the head of the army having the loyalty of 17 war generals. So they said, no, you will live outside the capital and you must never come to the capital. Once that person became the supreme general. So there were positions of social mobility within the empire for enslaved people who showed bravery on the battlefield. So many of them actually were coming from present-day Central Sudan, Hausa land, Kanuri. Many became war generals as well. So it's not that all the enslaved all they did were menial jobs. No, many of them also had, and they enjoyed privileges more than even citizens. So. In terms of carriages, no, there were no carriages in West Africa or Central Africa, horse-drawn carriages. No, we did not have that. They were all mounted. They were all horse riders. They did not have carriages. No, but they used these horses for communication, for quick communication between the capital and the provinces, in addition to using them as war machine.
So, in recognition of the time, I think we can do one final question before everyone turns into a pumpkin here. Let's see.
I know,
Well,
like,
out of
Rochambeau.
deference here.
I just wanted to say, thank you so much. I'm totally an interloper. I'm a nurse and I play cello. And I want to tell you, I'm going to treat my bow with horsehair. I'm going to call it a whisker now.
Okay, so since that, we can give tomorrow.
Comment and on the question. Thank you so much. While you were talking, I had this memory of, I worked with the Black American West Museum on the history of Black cowboys in the American West, and we had this presenter talk about how West African equestrian skills and knowledge potentially translated into African American slaves taking on those roles in America and in the Americas, I guess we could say. I'm just curious if you are aware, like if that resonates with you, if you've seen any of that carry over from this, very established equestrian tradition in Africa to that translating into folks having skills when they were enslaved in the Americas. So that's just what came up for me, if you have any information on that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that question. Considering the fact that the transatlantic slavery did not necessarily discriminate against anyone, it captured, many people across, princesses, carpenters, blacksmiths, warriors, soldiers, even the predator sometimes become the prey, right? So all of them enter the Middle Passage. Therefore, it makes sense. I know that cowboy tradition, African role, contribution to that is there because people have done that for cow was domesticated in Africa for about 7,000 BC. So that has gone for many years, and by 500 AD, also Christian tradition had become something very common, coming from across the Sahara, but also coming from the Nile Valley as well. From Nile Valley to Kanabonu to Lake Chad area, that's a very short route through Meroe. So these traditions were already present. So I have not seen any direct documentary evidence to support that, but it makes sense that there will be horse riders who came to the Americas. Yeah.
So I think that final question, drawing these direct links across the world, linking, West Africa and Colorado here is a great place to end a really long and wonderful day full of interdisciplinary scholarship that I think lived up to the subtitle of Horses in the Human Story, a Global Perspective. And I think it's just been an incredible treat here, to hear the long-form thoughts from our keynote speaker here, Professor Ogundiran. And in addition to thanking everyone who put in their time and effort to organizing the event today, please close me with another warm thank you for Professor Ogundiran.